Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are staring down just a huge, dense stack of sociological analysis. We're talking about identity, power, perception. And our mission really is to decode this incredibly complex relationship between gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality.
And not just what they are, but how these massive power structures are constantly shaping them, defining them, and restricting them.
Exactly. We want to help you move past this, culturally dominant idea that gender is just a simple, fixed binary.
Right. The goal is to understand how society creates these rigid rules, why we feel so compelled to follow them, and really critically, how all this leads to very real, tangible inequalities in people's lives.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. This is policy. It's affecting lives right now. I mean, the sources pointed to a really recent and powerful example.
Ruling in Virginia.
Yeah, a federal judge in Richmond, Virginia, just ruled that gender-affirming care is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Which is fascinating because it's an acknowledgement of the core sociological problem we're talking about. The judge recognized the profound negative effects, the anguish that transgender people experience because of that disparity between their internal identity and the sex they were assigned at birth.
So when you have institutions and bills trying to block access to this medical care,
that ruling becomes this critical point of protection. And it's based entirely on the social and psychological reality of identity.
Okay, so let's really unpack this sociological view of gender, because the source material is crystal clear on this. While we might frame gender as a binary man or woman, that's just the social construction.
Right, it's not the reality. Multiple genders have always existed across history and across cultures.
It's the difference between an idea and actual human existence.
Exactly. A social construct, like the gender binary, is just an idea that's been created and accepted by people in a society. And if society creates it, society also maintains it through, endless norms and roles and institutions.
And nothing shows how fluid these supposedly fixed norms are better than the color example.
Oh, I love this one.
Think about pink and blue. Today, you instantly associate pink with feminine, blue with masculine, right?
Of course.
But the sources note that until the 1940s, the generally accepted rule was that pink was for boys.
Because it was seen as stronger, more decisive.
And blue was for girls, because it was more delicate and dainty. The entire code just reversed in less than a century.
It's a perfect, striking illustration. It just proves that what we accept as natural or innate is actually just, well, a consensus. And that consensus gets enforced through binaries.
Oppositional constructs.
Yes, like black, white, masculine, feminine. They exaggerate differences between groups until they seem to have absolutely nothing in common.
The classic, men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
That's the cultural expression of this exact mechanism. And when you buy into that, you're actively erasing all the complicated realities. It just wipes out non-binary identities and ignores the huge, complex spectrum of human experience.
So if the external world is constantly defining these rules for us, how do we end up internalizing them?
Well, a sociologist named Charles Cooley had a foundational answer for this. It's his theory of the looking glass self.
The looking glass self, like a mirror.
Exactly. He argued our self-understanding isn't purely internal. It's constructed by how we perceive others are viewing us.
So it's a three-step process.
Kind of. First, we imagine our appearance or our action. Second, we imagine how others are judging that appearance. Is it positive? Is it negative?
And third, we have a feeling about it.
A resulting self-feeling, yeah. Like pride if we think we're being affirmed or, mortification if we feel disapproved of.
So how we express our gender is tied directly to how we anticipate society will judge us. That anticipation literally shapes our reality.
It creates this incredibly powerful, self-regulating social cycle. And another sociologist, George Herbert Mead, he actually mapped out the stages of how we internalize all those judgments.
It starts with imitation, right? Just copying. Simple imitation. Then it moves to the play stage, where a child might play mommy or a firefighter, adopting these singular roles, but without really seeing the whole picture.
And then comes the game stage.
Which is where we learn the rules. We start to understand that everyone has a role, and that we all have to follow certain expectations to make the game of society work.
In the final stage.
That's the generalized other. This is the big one. It's when we internalize the common norms and expectations of the entire larger society, not just our family or our friends.
And that's how these expectations that men should be strong, women should be caring, get so deeply embedded in our sense of self.
They become part of our own internal monologue.
Okay, let's turn that internal self outward then. to gender expression. This is how someone presents themselves. Clothing, hair, mannerisms, all that.
And those norms are incredibly rigid. Women are supposed to be pretty, delicate. Men are stoic and strong.
And the mechanism used to keep everyone in line is gender policing. It's the enforcement of those normative gender expressions, usually based on the sex assigned at birth. If you step out of bounds, society has a way of pushing you back in.
The sources pointed to Emily Kane's research on parents.
Yeah, which show this really clear pattern. Parents would often discourage femininity in their sons, things like expressing emotion or wanting toys that were seen as for girls.
And why?
Primarily, it was a fear of social disapproval from outsiders.
That fear is so powerful, and it reinforces that cultural idea that masculinity is ultimately defined in opposition to femininity. To be a man, you have to not be feminine.
Which brings us to the different definitions of masculinity. You have hegemonic masculinity.
The dominant ideal. Independence, aggression, physical toughness.
Then you have hypermasculinity, which is the extreme, often violent version you see glorified in media, making aggression and risk-taking seem normal.
But the one that does so much damage is toxic masculinity.
Right. This is the cultural pressure to conform to those hegemonic ideals. Power, status, repressing your emotions. And it takes a documented, severe negative toll on men's own mental and physical health.
So the people enforcing the rules are getting harmed by them too.
It's a crucial point. These rules hurt everyone. And when you look at the flip side femininity, you immediately see the power dynamic at play.
Right. The sources note that a tomboy, a girl acting masculine, is seen much more positively than a sissy, a boy acting feminine.
And that difference is a direct reflection of a patriarchal society. Masculinity is just perceived as more highly valued.
So a girl who taps into it is seen as ambitious or strong.
But a boy leaning into femininity is seen as actively giving up power and status.
But women can't fully claim that masculine power without some kind of consequence. That's where the feminine apologetic comes in.
It's the idea that women in traditionally masculine roles have to consciously balance it with feminine performance to be socially accepted.
Like female CEOs or politicians who face so much scrutiny over their appearance.
Exactly. They have to perform this delicate balance of being competent and being conventionally feminine, just to be taken seriously.
A classic example is the female athlete who feels she needs to wear makeup or mark herself as heterosexual just to counter the perception of toughness.
To avoid that violent gender policing and reclaim some social capital. And this behavior fits right in with what's called emphasized femininity.
Which is the pattern that gets the most cultural support.
And it's often defined around compliance, accommodating men's interests. It fundamentally operates as a reaction to and a support system for hegemonic masculinity.
Now, to really understand the gravity of all this policing, we have to recognize that identity isn't just one category. We need to talk about intersectionality.
Yeah, the term first articulated by Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989. Intersectionality is the idea that inequalities are produced by multiple interconnected social characteristics.
Gender, race, class, sexuality.
All of them. They combine and they transform the experience of oppression. It's not just adding one thing on top of another. It's how they meet at the intersection and create a unique, compounded experience.
So for marginalized groups, the negative impact isn't just cumulative, it's exponential.
Precisely. The sources give some crucial context here, noting that nationwide schools are often really hostile environments for LGBTQIA+ and gender nonconforming students of color.
The bullying is compounded.
It's compounded. It hits based on race, sexual orientation, and gender identity all at once. And for queer youth of color, studies found a disproportionately higher experience of homicidal ideations.
That is just a sobering statistic. It proves that this societal pressure, when it's coupled with racial and sexual prejudice, creates a systemic crisis of health and safety.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Let's move to the physical realm, the embodiment of gender. This is about how cultural ideals create expectations for and literally influence the form of our bodies.
Right, we mold our bodies to fit the social script, exaggerating perceived differences between genders. You can see it throughout history.
Foot binding in Chinese culture, neck rings in some African and Asian cultures.
The use of corsets in Western history, which dramatically altered the female skeleton. Even something like high heels started as a masculine fashion statement before it shifted.
And in modern Western society, this brings us right to Naomi Wolf's beauty myth.
Her argument is that as women gained more political and social power, the idea of beauty became weaponized, a political tool.
A mechanism of control.
Exactly. This constant, unattainable standard of beauty sustains consumer culture. And Wolf argues it's led directly to increased rates of eating disorders and plastic surgery. The body becomes a political battlefield.
The sources mention Hillary Clinton's presidential run, where the media just relentlessly judged everything she wore, how she looked.
Meanwhile, her male counterparts, their appearances got little to no critical attention. The focus shifts from policy to presentation.
And those ideals, they just keep shifting, but they always seem to reinforce thinness, whiteness, and very specific feminine shapes. You even see it in toys.
G.I. Joe and Barbie. The female body gets progressively slimmer, the male body gets progressively larger, more muscular. Unrealistic goals for everyone.
And that unrealism translates directly into real-world behavior, which you see so clearly in the data on cosmetic surgery.
The top procedures, breast augmentation, liposuction, they align perfectly with those hyper-feminine, youthful, often whitewashed ideals from the media. It's a direct embodied consequence.
These ideals even show up in our everyday spaces, like the gym.
Oh, gym culture is a classic case study in gendered spaces. Beyond the obvious segregation of changing rooms, the sources note that a lot of the equipment is designed for an average male individual.
In terms of body size and height.
Right, so it creates these systemic barriers for shorter people, including a lot of women and non-binary people. They can't adjust equipment correctly or use it safely.
And the policing continues inside those spaces.
In men's sporting communities, it's often verbal aggression, slurs like "throw like a girl." In women's communities, it manifests differently. Women often evaluate each other against beauty norms, especially in places like changing rooms.
And someone who is perceived as more masculine might experience harassment in a women-only space.
Even when those spaces are designed for safety, the binary norms affect everyone.
Okay, let's shift our focus to sexuality, who a person is attracted to. Like gender, it's a cultural universal, but its meaning is also a social construct. It shifts dramatically over time and place.
And the challenge in studying sexuality in the U.S. is just the difficulty of accurate measurement. Definitions change, and more importantly, a lot of non-heterosexual individuals just don't feel safe enough to disclose their identities on surveys.
Which skews the data.
It skews it toward invisibility. But despite that, recent Gallup polls show a really significant increase in people identifying as non-heterosexual.
And the key finding here is that this is not because of a sudden uptick in attraction.
No. It's because of increased societal acceptance and visibility. People who were always non-heterosexual are simply now more comfortable being open about it.
And this shift is happening in the face of heterosexism.
Which is the systemic discrimination or prejudice that just assumes heterosexuality is the normal default orientation.
This brings us to institutional conflict. The landmark Supreme Court ruling on marriage equality in 2015 made same-sex marriage legal nationwide.
And yet, the sources note it's already being challenged again in the highest court.
This ongoing struggle over rights can be viewed through conflict theory.
Right, which focuses on competition over limited resources. The ideological struggle is about dominant groups wanting to preserve the traditional nuclear family ideal because that model reinforces their cultural and political power.
But it's not just ideological, it's also about tangible resources.
Exactly. The fight is over the very real economic benefits tied to marriage social security benefits, tax breaks, medical insurance. Denying those benefits is an economic consequence of an ideological conflict.
It's a fight over who is entitled to state-sponsored economic security.
Fundamentally.
Finally, let's look at how all this is handled or not handled in U.S. sex education. Unlike a country like Sweden, it's not universally required here.
And the debate isn't really whether to teach it, but how. The sources outline 3 models: abstinence only, abstinence plus, and a comprehensive safety and responsibility focus.
And the majority of U.S. adults actually support a comprehensive curriculum, one that would include consent, healthy relationships, and sexual orientation.
Yet the reality in the classroom is often so different. The routine omission of LGBTQIA+ issues is effectively denying young people information critical to their basic health and well-being.
The statistic was that less than 4% of LGBTQIA+ youth reported any mention of their orientation in health class.
That lack of information means increased risk and isolation.
And the evidence overwhelmingly favors the comprehensive model.
Overwhelmingly. Comprehensive sex ed that affirms LGBTQIA+ youth and teaches safe sex leads to dramatically better outcomes. Just look at the data.
Sweden's teenage birth rate is 5 per 1,000. The U.S. rate is 16.7 per 1,000.
And when you look at high-rate states like Mississippi, with 28 births per 1,000 for women ages 15-19. Sociologists can clearly correlate those negative outcomes with the limited abstinence-focused curricula being taught. The choices we make about curriculum are literally determining health outcomes.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from the surprising history of pink and blue all the way to the complexities of identity, the pressures of expression toxic masculinity, the feminine apologetic, and the political reality of institutional change.
I think the essential takeaway is that gender and sexuality are never static or purely personal. They're constantly being defined by external forces, inscribed on our bodies, translated into power dynamics, and leveraged in policy decisions that affect everything from medical care to economic rights.
Understanding these forces is essential.
It's essential to recognizing and hopefully dismantling the inequalities they create.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. The sources noted that even non-binary individuals who are outside the man-woman binary sometimes feel this intense social pressure to fit into a queer box or conform to a certain aesthetic. If the social goal is liberation from rigid categories, what forms of internal and external policing persist even within communities that are trying to escape them? What does it mean to define what is non-binary? That's something to consider as you process this deep dive.